Yeah.
Technology works. Fantastic.
I know. It's great to see you all. And I agree with
Where
Magali about everyone. Let's pass the mic around. Yeah, it's great.
where are you? What time is it?
I'm in Denver, and it's 8:30 in the morning. So
Fantastic.
all
Well,
good.
good morning to you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, and good afternoon to you. Hope you all had a great day today.
Fantastic. So, um,
He had a great day until now, but I think he's a bit stressed now that to have to face 5 ladies like us.
well, I have,
Yeah.
I have
Cedric can do it, right?
we
It's great.
coll-
6 actually, with you, sorry.
collectively we have one big challenge, and I thank you all for being here because we're competing with none other than Mr. Biden or President Biden, who is speaking just about now, I think. So I'm very glad to see you all here. Um, I think it's been a exceptionally rich day today, Decarbonization Day. I'm sure we've all been engaged in a variety of panels. I think we've all been driving the same agenda, which is to push the built environment, to push decarbonization of construction, and much more. And that's what we are going to talk about for the next hour. This is not a very diverse panel, actually. Um, And we're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk over the next hour is your leadership in advancing the agenda for decarbonizing the built environment, decarbonizing construction, and decarbonizing our economy. That's what we want to learn from you. We want you to share your experience. I'm going to prompt you some questions. Don't hesitate to intervene, to play the game. Ask your questions, your contribution. Everyone's welcome here. So before we do that, I would like to introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Rana. I don't know your titles all by heart. So Rana Gonheim, you are Chief Energy Systems and Infrastructure Division at UNIDO. With Claude Lauréat, you are Director of Cement at the Global Association of Cement and Concrete. No, I've said it wrong, the GCCA. Victoria Burrows, you have a very cool title. You are where are you?
I can say it.
Director of Advancing Net Zero at the World Green Building Council. We have Anna Williams. You work with Google. You are responsible for. You're the solution lead, and something you have to explain to us a little bit later on. Geo for Environment at Google. So we look forward to hear from you and understand what it is. We have Elizabeth Hausler on the screen. Hi, Elizabeth, from Build Change. You're the CEO of Build Change. And last but not least, Magali Anderson, who is the Chief Sustainability and Innovation Officer at Holcim. So let's get cracking with this conversation. We are here in the building pavilion, and I'm going to start with you, Victoria. It's actually the first time there is a building pavilion at a COP. Last year we had the first step. It was a joint pavilion with the Women Business Pavilion. You have been involved in pushing driving the green building agenda for many years. Lately, over the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, you were involved in an initiative called Building to COP,
Yes.
which happens to be driven by an all-women team. It's been a massive success, a massive mobilization, leading to what we have here today. Can you share your experience on where does it come from, where did it start, and how do you think it's contributing to really changing the agenda?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm not sure how Roland and Luca would feel about you referring to the Building to COP team as all women. They're not here, right? It's fine. But yeah, gosh, great question. And very broad. Yes, the Building to COP coalition is a big part of why we're here, and with the World Green Building Council, C40, WBCSD, Resilience Rising, Global Alliance of Buildings and Construction, we have been working to promote the built environment specifically at COP as a critical solution to the decarbonization agenda, and of course this year also for resilience and adaptation. And yeah, it is actually the built environment lead for the Climate Champions team is called Bex Porter, and she's a real force behind what we're working on doing. But I think it's the nature of collaboration that's brought the Building to COP coalition together. You know, as that group of organizations, we've never worked together formally and officially before on an agenda, you know, and spend our entire year basically working up to this work at COP. And it comes from the drive to promote buildings as a solution, the sort of frustration that it's not presented or positioned enough within the COP agenda, and, you know, literally writing letters to the COP presidencies and saying, you know, we believe that this segment of the industry needs to be represented as a solution. We are here representing our networks of solutions providers, and we're here to show that the built environment needs to decarbonize, but also has the solutions to decarbonize. And you mentioned the green building movement, and I'm really proud to be part of the World Green Building Council. We've got around 75 national green building councils all over the world with some incredible, inspirational and passionate thinkers. And you know, you asked where it comes from. I was immediately thinking of a personality test I once did when I worked for a construction firm. And in the kind of summary paragraph, the first line, it says, "Never tell Victoria it cannot be done." And I come across that quite a lot in my role. Someone will say it can't be done, and I'm like, hold my phone. I'll come back to you.
So let's stay on the can't be done topic. I was talking with Victoria earlier on, and she shared her experience at MIPIM. MIPIM is a real estate, massive, the world's biggest real estate trade fair. You, in your role, you've joined the Green Building Council. I think it's fair to say that the agenda has moved from green to net zero.
Yeah.
From what you are telling me and what we're hearing and we're observing, the world's largest real estate trade fair does not have nor green nor net zero on its agenda, really.
Yeah.
What can we do about it?
Yeah, true story. I mean, I think it's a bit like this, you know, we can show up, you know, really champion the message, have a really strong, clear and succinct message about what it is we're calling for. The proof of the possible, I think, helps with the mindset shift that we need to be seeing. You know, I was asked in a panel earlier in one of the Egypt pavilions, you know, is it possible in Egypt? And I was like, you know, you have net zero buildings already, right? I can talk to you about a whole list of case studies. So, you know, I think we're wanting to kind of go back to conferences like that, you know, bring with us the kind of powerhouse that we have around solutions and bring that narrative into these conferences, because it needs to really step up a gear. And, you know, I think I've said so far in every session I've been involved in, the question is not about how can we make buildings more green, it's why are we not targeting net zero, and then working back from there. It's incrementalism. We don't have time for that.
Fantastic. So next up, MIPIM.
Yeah, next up, yeah. Yeah.
Very good. So let's stay on the advocacy topic, and Claude, I'm going to turn to you. You've spent a number of years, actually you wrote here decades, but I don't dare saying it. You've been advocating for an industry that here at COP is labeled as hard to abate. Outside COP, which is known as a pretty heavy-duty industry, that's the cement and concrete industry. You've been inventing concepts such as the 5C concept that Magali used even in a conference earlier this week, which is basically creating a vision on how the cement industry in Europe is going to reach net zero by 2050. And then now you're taking on the global challenge with the Global Cement and Concrete Association. So many years of advocacy. So can you share your experience and your feeling on how is this fundamental for the transition of our sector on our journey to net zero? All this advocacy, this working, putting together actors hand in hand, working hand in hand and progressing bit by bit towards net zero. I think our sector would not have talked about net zero 3, 4, 5 years back, and now we're here.
Well, I think you can say decade, and actually this year I like to proudly say it's 3 decades I'm working in the environment. I graduated as an engineer in 1992, and that was the year of Rio, and I think it's why I'm proud to actually I realized this is exactly 30 years ago, and I think the world and the industry has gone a really, really long way since, from awareness, what's the environment, learning how to measure. I think that in 1992 we didn't even really know what we were emitting. We learned on how to measure, how to report. Probably not many people were that convinced, and CO2 was maybe even not really on the agenda then, maybe other environmental topics. So that has been a long journey, and I didn't start it only with the cement industry. I actually started with many, what we used to call in Europe, energy-intensive industries. That was even worse than heavy industries. I don't know. Anyway, it has been an amazing journey with a lot of doubts, a lot of challenges. I think a lot of resistance from industry at the beginning, because we didn't really see a way out. I would say it was about competitiveness. What if we are the only one to move ahead and the rest of the world doesn't move? That was also a European perspective. The risk, those issues of carbon leakage. So, and then in Europe, I think it started to move, and we said, okay, we need a roadmap for the European cement industry. We need a plan on how we transition. So from, okay, we don't really know what to do, what's the plan? And then indeed, we had the first roadmap, I think, in Europe for the cement industry in 2013. And then we had a second one and a third one. And then indeed, I moved to the global cement industry, and this was all around sustainability, a bit further away from the legislative part and from the legislation bit, but more on the advocacy side. And I think it has just been an amazing 4 years journey with the GCCA, with the launch of our roadmap last year, and how our members committed to deliver carbon net zero concrete by 2050. And this year, just only a year later, I see actions all over the places, and a lot of commitment. Now, it's not easy. How do you achieve this? How do you get everyone on board? You have to work internally, I mean, with the industry, with the partners, with the companies, but also externally. You need to onboard the stakeholders and the whole world. So it's a lot about partnership, and it takes a lot. You said never give up. You said no, don't say it's not possible. What characterizes me is never give up. And I like to say I'm a rower, and rower never give up. It's each stroke after each stroke. And it doesn't matter if the previous one was not good, you just give the next one as best as you can. And you make it to the finish line. So I'm more like a never give up person.
Fantastic. So three decades of driving the decarbonization of the cement sector. Congratulations. I can't not ask the question, especially in an external facing role like yours. And it's a very male-driven industry. Has it made any difference or impact on you, the fact that you're a woman?
Impact. That's. I could speak for hours. I don't want if the others want to have a little bit of the floor. I think that probably what I would say the positive. Maybe what helped was another way of saying, of another way of doing things, and that may have helped the journey. And this is where I think we know we need diversity, and it's probably another way. I would say that's what I brought, another way of doing.
Great, thank you. Let's talk about tech. So I'm going to turn to you, Anna. First of all, can you just because I'm still really puzzled. Can you explain to us what does geo for environment mean?
Sure. So I'm Anna at Google. I sit within our geo organization, and then a subset of our geo organization is a team called Geo for Environment. So I suppose it is everyone who leverages and uses Google's geo data, so Google Maps, which many of you probably use every day, anyone who uses that data to build products that will impact the environment. So that would include a product that I work on called Environmental Insights Explorer, which I can touch on, a product called Earth Engine. They've organized us in a way so that we can be laser focused on building solutions that are going to have a positive impact on the environment.
Great.
Yeah.
That sets the scene perfectly. So at Google, you focus very much on cities.
Yes.
In fact, we had an event on cities a couple of days ago, and we were lucky enough to have Selvin Hart, the Secretary General's climate envoy, with us, and he was very clear. Cities are the epicenter of the fight against climate change, and this battle will be won or lost in cities. Can you explain us a little bit your approach at Google on how you tackle this? How do you collect data? How you use the data and how you share this data with cities, and how it feeds into their decision making?
Yeah. So completely agree. Cities, while they're making incredible progress in being more sustainable, today cities contribute 70% of the world's carbon emissions, and many of them lack the data and technology needed to make progress on their climate commitments. And in 2020, Google committed to helping over 500 cities reduce 1 gigaton of carbon emissions annually by 2030 and beyond. And one of the key initiatives that we're going to do in order to achieve that is making data and insights, environmental data and insights, universally accessible and useful to cities. And that is through a product called Environmental Insights Explorer, which is a freely available platform that leverages Google's geodata to provide over 40,000 cities and regions now with data to help cities measure their baseline emissions, identify opportunities to reduce emissions, and really importantly, be able to track the progress of their climate action interventions over time to ensure they're actually meeting their target. Environmental data for cities can be incredibly resource intensive, cost intensive, time intensive to collect, and our goal is really to remove these barriers that may have prevented cities from really accelerating on their climate agendas. Environmental Insights Explorer, we provide data, we provide transportation and buildings emissions data, as well as solar potential data, to really support cities across the climate action journey of measuring, planning, acting, and tracking. And then simultaneously, we're also exploring ways that we can be more useful to cities, such as helping cities become more resilient to the effects of climate change, including solutions such as tree canopy, which we'll be rolling out to hundreds of cities later this year, to help cities inform where they can plant more trees to lower street level temperatures and improve quality of life, and then also air quality data. We're using Google Street View cars equipped with air quality sensors to map out hyper-local air quality street by street in a city, to help cities understand air quality throughout the city. Interesting, air quality can vary up to 800% even within city streets, so really having a deeper understanding of that can inform and inspire action.
So you're providing data on buildings emission. That's incredibly granular. How do you collect such granular data, and how do cities integrate that into their process? Because they don't have an army of data engineers that not all cities are equipped. How do they use your data?
Yep. So for buildings data, we're providing cities with annual building emissions, as well as a breakdown of building emissions of residential and non-residential buildings, as well as a percentage of the measured area. Our building emissions data, we are using satellite imagery to calculate the floor area of buildings and then the energy intensity of those buildings. And it is the size and the location of the building that is informing our assumption of whether a building is residential or non-residential, and that also informs our assumption of the energy intensity of that building. How we are supporting cities today, it's a great question, and I work with cities across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and the resources that cities have to be able to ingest, manipulate, utilize this data really varies. And so I think as a data provider, it puts a lot of responsibility on us to make sure that the data is as useful and as accessible as possible. It's not enough just to release the data needs to be useful, and we rely very heavily on partners on the ground to help us ensure that the data is being used, and we rely very heavily on the cities themselves to provide us with feedback. I actually sat through a 2-hour workshop last week with about 5 to 6 cities in Europe with my product and engineering team, just to hear the feedback from cities to understand how would this data be more useful? What level of granularity do you need for this data to actually impact your climate action planning efforts? I think I sit in a much different place than perhaps my other panelists, whereas I'm not really building solutions. I'm enabling solutions at the city level, at the partner level, at the government level. So for me, I'm really we want to just be helpful. And so I can kind of be a sponge and just listen and be very inspired by the types of solutions that partners are developing, take that feedback, ingest it, and then provide data in a way that is going to be useful for cities, partners to actually build meaningful solutions into their climate action processes.
Do you think you'll be able to provide at some point embedded CO2 data of buildings, or is that just too much?
We're always listening to feedback. I think where we can really contribute value is from a geo perspective. And so I think we provide cities with the floor area of their buildings, and then we allow cities to actually be able to do a lot of customization on top of that data, because oftentimes cities know more than we do in terms of the building footprints or the energy intensity of that particular building. So we think it's more useful for us to allow our data to be more manipulated, usable, customizable, but our core competency is our geo data. And so I think by us providing the floor area of the building, cities can add on top of that, complement that with their knowledge and the data that they have. But never say never. I will take that back as feedback.
Great. We already know what the conclusion of this discussion is. Never say never. Good. Let's go to a form of, let's call it lower tech. Elizabeth, I'm going to turn to you. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that you have profoundly influenced the global development policy by making resilience a major component of reconstruction efforts. And this is at the heart of COP27, so the adaptation and resilience agenda. The question I have for you really is whether there is a specific role for women in advancing resilience in the built environment.
So can I rephrase your question as how many different roles are there available for women in changing the narrative and promoting decarbonization of the built environment? So I run Build Change. It's an 18-year-old social innovator that works on disaster resilient housing, primarily in Asia, Latin America, and Caribbean. We have made over 1 million people safer by working primarily on disaster resilient housing and schools, which represents $4 billion of housing assets that are protected from disaster, whether that's earthquake or extreme weather. And most of those assets are held in the hands of the homeowners, and most of those homeowners are families led by women. So I think there's a role for women in every part of this discussion, from CEOs to engineers to finance professionals. Build Change is founded by a woman. 80% of our executive team are women. All of our senior engineers are women. All of our country directors are women. Our finance experts are women. We have women builder trainers. All along the line, women are involved in making housing more resilient. So yes, I think there's a huge role and many roles for women in this sector. We also are heavily involved in technology development. So some of our solutions are very low tech, as you say. It's basically getting the mix of concrete right in a construction project, or it's making sure there's rebar in a ring beam so that a building can be tied together and perform better in wind or earthquake. So a lot of our solutions are very low tech. They are about using building materials in the right way and conserving building materials, but they're also very high tech in other ways, in that we are building technology platforms to enable governments and microfinance lenders and others to be able to scale resilient housing solutions so that they can meet the needs of more families, especially those. We have partnerships with microfinance institutions in Philippines, for example, who are enabling homeowners to strengthen existing buildings, and the vast majority of the clients and borrowers are women.
What's Elizabeth? What do you expect from COP? How can the outcome of the discussions here in Sharm el Sheikh can help on the ground the resilience agenda?
Yeah. So you might think I'm going to answer that question from a technology standpoint or a gender standpoint, but I'm going to answer it from a money standpoint. So the dialogue about loss and damage and about preventing loss and damage and about funding the prevention of loss and damage, I hope we see large amounts of financing and funding being channeled to markets that have been more heavily affected by disasters to invest in strengthening buildings, strengthening the built environment before the big next disaster, because housing is ultimately a women's issue. Women and children and girls are 14 times more likely to die in a disaster than men. And when a disaster happens, especially a windstorm, maybe in a small island nation, the hit to GDP is usually hardest hit by the housing sector. So I want to see funding driven toward investing in prevention, investing in preventing that loss and damage from happening.
Great. Now, I want to come back to something you've touched upon, the question of skills. And this is not a gender-related question, but is there a question of skills acceleration in order to accelerate the resilience agenda, or is it more technology? And by the way, Magali doesn't agree on the fact that concrete is a low-tech solution. It's a very high-tech solution.
Making concrete more green is a high-tech solution for sure. But using it right in a disaster-resilient home, so yeah. My dad's a bricklayer, so I spent a lot of my youth working for my dad as a bricklayer in the construction sector. So maybe my familiarity with the building material is clouding my judgment on its sophistication. Anyway, but we've got to use it right. I mean, there's a huge opportunity, right, to use cement in the right way, in a way that makes a building more resilient and also reduces carbon emissions. So that's part of Build Change's argument for upgrading existing housing, right? We can do that at a much lower carbon footprint to building new. I mean, think about all the materials that go into a landfill after a big disaster, right? That's a huge, huge amount of carbon. So if we can strengthen an existing building and make it more resilient to a disaster, maybe make it more livable for the family, fix the leaky roof, add a second story so folks can rent it out, then it's a win. It's a win for everyone. So yeah, there is this dual need to use technology and to build skills at the same time, for sure. I, as a construction worker, have a lot of affection for the construction sector. I think it can be a very well-paying, rewarding job in various different markets. So the extent to which we can build skills as well as drive investment in greener construction, I think, again, everyone wins.
Fantastic. So let's move before I give you the floor, Magali, and you can go on innovation. Let's talk a little bit about product innovation. And Rana, I'm going to turn to you. You're not responsible for product innovation or for the product at all, for that matter. However, you've been working on an angle which is very closely related to our ability to put innovative low-carbon products on the market. And specifically, what we are calling for all the time with regulator, let's create demand for innovative products. Let's create demand for high-tech solution, let's create demand for circular products. And you've looked particularly at the role of public procurement, and within IDDI, you've specifically deep dive into the change of culture that needs to change in public procurement globally. So can you provide us with an insight on how you think this could be potentially a big game changer?
Sure, and perhaps before doing that, I would just like to give a brief insight into what's my take also. I recognize as well that I'm very different than the others on the panel. So, I mean, I work for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. I am from a developing country as well. So, for me, you know, throughout my career, I think the drive has been always looking at the nexus of development, climate change, and industry has a big role to play in both of these elements. And I would add to what you said, Cedric, and sorry if that might, but actually those industries that we're talking about today in developing countries are often referred to as the polluters. And I believe in changing narratives, be it regarding gender equality or being regarding also changing the face of that industry, because in fact what I see today is industries like yours are taking the lead, you know, in showing that change can happen. And so for the longer time, we've worked more on introducing energy efficiency and renewable energy in many, many developing countries. This is how we work with cement industry. This is how we work with steel industry in really building their skills, helping and trigger investments in energy efficiency and renewables. But then came Paris, and the Paris Agreement really transformed also the way that we're looking at how do we need to transform these industries. And this is where basically the conception of the Industrial Deep Decarbonization Initiative started. And we started to look at, I mean, what are the countries that have the bigger lever for creating change for industry, and where does, you know, these levers also for change make the biggest impact? And this is where also then we thought the idea of demand creation. Because yes, what we see is that the technologies like CCUS, like hydrogen and so on, they require major investments. But these investments, although they're quite high upstream, they're really downstream at the product level. They're more affordable, you know. When we're talking about a 2,000 euro addition to a household of €500,000 in Europe, that's really a fraction, you know. So I mean, the argument of the green premium, sometimes, you know, I'm sure that customers would play that if you make that very visible as well, that this is what you're paying for. And so this is how we then launched the Green Public Procurement Pledge, and thanks to Germany and many other champion countries that are joining us on this, what we said is, well, first we need countries to start requiring disclosure for embodied carbon emission on construction projects, and construction materials come as an input for that. We need better alignment between procurement targets and national climate goals, because there's also misalignment on that. And we need governments, you know, the first movers, like in industry, we have the first movers, to actually commit to procuring low carbon steel and low carbon cement and concrete. So yeah, I think this is not an easy thing. It requires quite a lot of diligence. It requires, so I would very much agree with, and I feel like both of what you said regarding never giving up and so on are things that I also ascribe for. But then also on the other side, patience, I have to say, is a very, you know, negotiations, oh my God. They require a lot of patience. So I would add also to the recipe of what my fellow panelists said is just like patience has been key to really ensure we have more countries joining, to bring also consensus, which I know for cement and concrete we don't have yet. But I'm sure that, you know, with such a great committed group of women working on this and men supporting us as well, that we're really going to make quite a good progress on this. So yeah, perhaps I'll stop here. And
yeah, great. But another question for you. Quid of well, let's say, skills within government? How about capacity buildings within governments? Is this something that you are observing that needs to be accelerated? And is there perhaps, I can't help asking the question, is there perhaps a role for women to play in this sphere?
I mean, there's a role for everyone to play. We need more women, absolutely, because if we look at the renewable energy sector, we're celebrating that there's 1/3 of the workforce is women in comparison to the fossil fuel industry, where probably it's 10%. So yes, we need women across the board. We need young women on top across the board, and we need to provide the right policy frameworks to help women advance in their careers also, and to get a chance to be part of the workforce. So yeah, absolutely. Now, capacity building, so I'd like to maybe put the discussion then in two folds. One is we have now also what we are creating is a lot of the advanced economies, the more industrialized economies are taking those steps towards industrial decarbonization. But we had some consultations ahead of COP27, and what we see is that not just governments, but even industries in developing countries do not see yet the opportunity or the need to change. And that is something that we also need to change. They need to really see the decarbonization opportunity. They need to understand, and so this awareness building, both for industry and also for governments in developing countries. And absolutely, this is exactly the role that we as an organization play, to mobilize financing and work with developing countries to create, better enabling frameworks that help then industries to make the investments that are needed to really bring the decarbonization challenge to life. So,
Rana, last question. What's your expectation from COP27?
Oh wow. Well, let's not go towards the loss and damage. I really hope we have something to celebrate there. But I have to say that for me, the fact that we have a decarbonization day at COP, so today, the fact that we are looking at these sectors is something that's quite promising. We have not seen that in any previous COP. Of course, the Glasgow Breakthrough Agenda lays the foundations for that. So that's already quite a good one. I would be a bit forward-looking and say, what do I want by COP28 rather than what do I expect from... I think the expectations for this one have already been public, but I really would love to see more governments joining and committing to that. I would like to see an alignment on the standards and definition that we really, we all are saying we need to move fast, we need to move deeper, we need to create, but then, why aren't we doing it? I think we are getting stuck also in arguments, and now is not the time for arguments. There's really a crisis, and we need to all put everything on board. We need to put efficiency, we need to put renewables, we need to put deep decarbonization technologies as well, and yeah, we need to collaborate better together. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Now, Magali, let's turn to you. You started your career pretty much on an oil rig, if I'm not mistaken, and you've advanced to that, and today you are responsible for getting rid of 100 million tons of CO2. Quite a feat, quite a challenge. Focusing on your current endeavor, would you say it's a question of technology?
So I will go back first with the start, which is when I started my career, as you ladies had one of those, so I will get mine. I think starting working at the middle of the sea alone amongst 80 men at a time where internet and other form of communication did not exist is one of those that you say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And I think a lot of us who have been working in this type of sectors where women have not always been fully welcome have lived those moments where we got so much stronger because they did not manage to kill us. So I think it goes with being strong, it goes with never give up, with if I tell you you can't do it, for sure you will do it. And I guess the sentence I am a huge admirer of Christiana Figueres, and she said I might not quote her exactly, but she said something like, "Impossible is not a fact; it's an opinion." And I think it's a great quote that would ramp up a bit, put up a bit that. And I almost forgot the question. I think I got it. So what? Is it technology? Okay.
100 million tons of CO2.
Well,
Is it a question
Elizabeth
of
just said that it was concrete was low tech. I bet you could joke, Elizabeth. I know that's not what you meant. But as I am in charge of innovation for cement and concrete, for sure, I do consider concrete as super high tech. But so it is and it is not. Because one of the concerns I have every time we say decarbonization is about technology is narrowing the topic so much that there's a bit of a tendency to say we will wait for the right technology to arrive. Until the right technology arrives, we sit back and do nothing. And that concerns me a lot. So I am a bit afraid that there's a bit too much of that speech of let's not change our habits, let's not change the way we do things because technology will come and save us. A bit like, you remember the Don't Look Up, the technology was going to save, but it never did. So I think technology is very important, and without technology, I don't think we'll go to zero, at least in our sector, because we will need at some stage to deploy carbon capture at large scale, etc. And that clearly is very technology driven. But nothing stops us today from moving quite rapidly. So I realize it is technology with a low carbon product we have on the market, but maybe it's not low tech, but it's, I don't know if old tech is a good word, but it's technologies that have been existed for a long time. So it's not a question now here of innovation, it's more a question of how do you scale up deployment. And I won't go too much because I'm sure you are fed up of listening of why we need better legal framework, why we need better incentive, why we need better this, better that. But I think here we don't need the technology, we need the deployment. But the other one I think we need is also how we work, rethinking how we build. And it's not just about putting low carbon cement of concrete, but also designing systems where us, the building material makers, are being incentivized to actually build more with less. And it sounds a bit silly when I say it that way, but if you think about it, let's say Holcim is about 100 years old. I think it's about 110 years old this year, actually. We've been selling volumes for 110 years old, which is the more cement I sell, the better, the more money I make. How do I incentivize my own, how do I change, how do I flip the barrel so that the less cement I sell, the more money I make? It's tricky, no? But actually, it's actually very feasible if I start selling systems. So if I sell a floor instead of the cement that is needed for the floor, my incentive is to put as little cement as possible in that floor. So it's really a complete different way of seeing things that as building material makers haven't really touched yet enough, because we have let the others putting us in a category of volume producers, of material producers, without giving us the opportunity to expand on performance and systems producer. And I think there are many things we can do exploring that. And that's one of the topic I like a lot, because it's way harder than innovation, because now we are talking about changing the value chain. And everyone knows when that requires some collaboration and easy on the paper, not that easy in real life.
No, that's great. Before we go, I'll come back on innovation in a second. But Elizabeth, I would like to jump to you. You work, as we've learned today, you work a lot with concrete for resilience, to improve existing built environments. Is what Magali doing, i.e. getting rid of the CO2 in that concrete, relevant for your stakeholders, or is that a different debate altogether?
It is relevant. Everything Magali is talking about is relevant. The system, selling the system is so relevant. We talk about housing being a process, not a product. It's not really just a technology solution or a building material. It's a whole system. It's a system around financing. It's a system around the policy environment. It's a system around building codes and building permits and that sort of thing. So yeah, that system discussion is absolutely relevant for build changes, government, stakeholders, and microfinance stakeholders, partners. They need a system that's going to work at scale. But for the homeowners themselves, decarbonizing or reducing carbon in cement is also very critical. Now, I could get really technical here, right? Because like straight Portland cement, right, that is a common thing, is very important for bridges and high strength needing structures and that sort of thing. But there are other types of cement that can also be very functional in the marketplace for, say, plaster on a house, for masonry on a house. And actually, it's better to use cement that is cheaper to produce and maybe has a little bit of waste product in it that dilutes the Portland cement. It is easier to work with. It sets up less quickly. As a mason, that's actually what you want to work with, as opposed to the more carbon intensive straight Portland cement, right? But making people aware that this product is in the market, that it's cheap, it's actually cheaper, right? It actually is less intensive in terms of carbon emissions is a challenge, right? Getting that word out to folks that you could actually use this other product. You can have it cheaper, it can cost less, it can produce exactly what you want. That is a challenge. And so overcoming these perceptions about what cement product works best in which environment is an educational process that we need to do. So yeah, these discussions are relevant at these very on the ground levels. Do you choose this type of cement or do you choose that type of cement? And what are the pros and cons of doing so?
I can't help thinking, Anna, we're going to have to feed you with lots of data on cement and concrete so that we go from geo to built-in. Magali, let's go back to you because you mentioned you're also in charge of innovation. You're in charge of a massive innovation center, probably the world's largest innovation center on clinker, cement, concrete, construction.
Because you make it look so big.
Very man-driven stuff. It's fascinating stuff. Very man-driven stuff. So how do you do to onboard women engineers and scientists in this field? Because there are many in our research center in Lyon. So how do you do that?
The same way you do for men? No, I'm joking. No, once they're in, you onboard them the same way, actually. But I think I forgot the statistic because I'm really useless with statistics. I speak more for experience than statistics. But I read somewhere, if my memory is correct, that you get 40% more innovation from a diverse team than from a non-diverse team. The number could be wrong, but it doesn't really matter. The story is good. No, it doesn't matter because at the end, what's important is if we take the same people coming out from the same school, from the same background, same gender, same nationality, same, and you expect them to come up with innovative ideas, I don't know. You might not get there. And I think it's a turnaround that we started in our center about 3-4 years ago, where we went from being a lot of French, mainly male, to recruiting foreigners, to recruiting people from the global south, to recruiting women, etc. And it was a very proactive decision to do that. And in case you don't know, I do write about women in the industry, so I could spend the next 3 hours explaining to you how you do to recruit more women. There's many things you can do, such as changing the image of the company, such as writing an inclusive job advertising, not one where you see 3 men big like this on coveralls and it's written job availability, and then women won't necessarily look at it and feel that is for them. So I could go for hours, but I think more importantly is on how we do it. Go to my blog if you want to see that, is why we did it. And it's really diversity of thinking. If we don't do that in an innovation center, then we're not doing our job, basically.
Great, fantastic. Look, time is passing. We're all knackered about a long day, so I'm going to come ask you a last question, or double question, because Rana, you added a question. First part of the question, looking forward into the future of the construction sector, the future of the built environment, the future of cities, Anna, where you concentrate. How do you see the role of the young generation of women to get involved into it and continue to drive or even accelerate this transition that, let's say, our generation has started? And the second part of the question, what do you expect from COP28? Let's go into one by one.
Well, I think there's plenty of roles for women, from being the planners in cities that also set better specifications and targets for our built environment, the way that it is structured, that we have more greenery and a lot. So there's really a lot of roles that women can play. But I think I would like to focus on how, because the roles are there, but it's just like, how do we get them? And Magali said that, the job descriptions, absolutely. Policies, yes, absolutely. Showing better examples, or not better, successful examples of women who have made it. We need to push all of these levers to make sure that women are part of that workforce. And I think I already laid out what I expect from COP28, so I'll just spare that time and pass it on to the colleagues.
Thank you. I hope for the young generation that we won't have to discuss this anymore, that it will just be natural, that we are a diverse world, and that we don't have too many of those women-only panel either. But for COP28, even more action, or more action is definitely something that that we need, and maybe one very specific topic. It's even more on carbon capture, use and storage, because there's not going to be any net zero world, and there are still technologies that are ignored and that are out of the agenda. And even if we have to be technology agnostic, there are still technology that require to be pushed more. So that's my hope for COP28.
Victoria.
Sure. Okay. So I think what we've heard a lot across COP already, and what is only going to keep coming up, is that we need better regulation and more data. And I think studies have shown that women in leadership positions, in governments, in cities, and in companies, in leadership positions like CSOs and otherwise, have led to better and more ambitious policies, emission reductions, and better transparency and disclosure of the emissions from those organizations. So to see more women in those sorts of positions will only help us get towards where we get to. I feel like women have an emotional connection with the effects of climate change when we see the awful footage on TV. We have a disposition to say, not on our watch, this is not happening, and an innate drive to change that, to do something about it, to implement action, to implement change, and also to address equality. So my hope for COP28, and not just COP28, but all of the conferences that we attend, is better representation of women, better sort of that stronger narrative, and of course, a Built Environment Day at COP28.
Fantastic. Anna, before we go to you, let's quickly jump to Denver.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So make space for women leaders to continue to stay in the game. I mean, Magali, I'm sure your leadership has been so instrumental and pivotal in creating that culture, right? And creating the opportunity to engage more women on the team. And in my case, I want to say thank you for allowing me to join remotely. The primary reason I am not at COP was because it's too long to be away from my son. So thank you very much for creating a space for me to participate as a women leader remotely in this context. And for the young women, I again want to channel what Magali was saying, just go for it, get out there, but bring your toughness, bring your armor, bring your drive, bring your tenacity, but go out there and get out there and do it, because we need you.
Great, thank you. Anna.
And the question is, what is my hope in terms of women participating in this space in the future? I think you brought up a really good point, which is leading by example and providing examples that younger women can actually see and use as inspiration. In my space, I really encourage the cities that I work with. I always want to build case studies with them, whether they were successful or they failed. I want to document what they did so that we can replicate that with other cities. So much more impactful when a city championing other cities versus Google helping, tell a city what they should be doing with our data. I think that when someone can see themselves in someone else, I think it's much easier to perhaps see that it's possible. So I think the more that we can be examples and provide guidance to future generations, younger women, and again, be very transparent with how we got here, what worked, what didn't work, I think the more information we can share and the more examples that we can share can really be beneficial.
And we need data.
And data. And data.
I think really, so I was just saying how diversity is so important, and that goes, maybe I forgot to mention diversity of generation. And so we start having quite a lot of young people in Holcim, and in my own team I've got 4 fresh outs now out of 10, so quite a large number. Because I love their angle, it's such a different angle, and the way they push us. And I can't help advertising for Force of Nature. I always have to advertise for Force of Nature. I'm sorry for that. It's a lady called Clover Hogan that you might know. And she created an organization where she trained our young people in our own organization to challenge us on how to speak with the senior leaders. And I'm going to have her starting recruiting the first cohort of people, because it's not just having young people, it's giving them the tool and the space that they need to speak. And I don't know about my expectation about COP, because I think I'm too old, too wise, and not lost too much of my craziness to have too much expectation about those things. But what I would say is I'm really happy to see how the built environment and the construction sector is really becoming more and more prominent. And I'm really happy to see, as we discussed yesterday, how resilience is becoming a bigger and bigger topic. And I think resilience would be my my key wish for, and you know that because I keep bothering you about resilience. I bore everyone about resilience. It's one of my ongoing always topic, but I think Elizabeth, I'm sure, will be absolutely in agreement with me. I think if resilience could become even more central, maybe a resilience day, I don't know, for COP28.
Great. Look, we're bang on time. We're almost Swiss here. We're so on time. Ladies, you are brilliant. Thank you so much. I think the one word or the few words I remember from this discussion, don't give up. So we certainly won't give up. If we were somewhere else, I would give you a little box of Belgian chocolates, but it's not going to be possible here. So instead, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Elizabeth. Thank you for
Elizabeth.
joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.